For this session, I wrote 72 words. For this session, I wrote 99 words. And yesterday, I forgot to do my January's word count total, which was 3,402 words. Here is the trend graph for the month of January. It seems to be my most stable writing month thus far. And for comparison, I will show you, oh, let me fix that. Focus. So here is December, November, and then this was October, September, and then August. For this session, I wrote 173 words. Sibby.
What she did learn from all the books was something else, something she hadn't really been expecting, which was that the story of loneliness is much longer than the story of life, in the sense of what most people mean by living, she said. Without children or partner, without meaningful family or a home, a day can last an eternity. A life without those things is a life without a story, a life in which there is nothing, no narrative flights, no plot developments, no immersive human dramas, to alleviate the cruelly meticulous passing of time. I finished Transit over the weekend, and it was a great read. This was my first Rachel Cusk book. I read this out of order, the first book in the trilogy being Outline, and I really enjoyed my experience. For a modern work, I felt that it was not overly modern in the sense of it coming across as something trendy. And though it isn't a large work, there was plenty to chew on and plenty new and fresh insights to think about. Last week, I was out of town on a bookstore getaway trip with my husband, and I got quite the haul of books. I generally prefer to purchase my books used. I think used books have so much character to them, but also it's, in my mind, less wasteful. There's also so much enjoyment in the hunting down of these books at used bookstores. It is such an event, and I absolutely delight in it. I've noticed that it also takes so much brain energy to browse bookstores, and this past week I browsed 3. Each one had its own distinct design of the labyrinth, and I made out of that with such plunder that I think I will have to split this book haul video into 2 parts. First up, we have The Art of Choosing by Sheena Iyengar. It is a nonfiction book, and it's actually labeled under psychology. Next, we have Henry James, A Portrait of a Lady. I started reading this as well as The Art of Choosing while I was away, and I'm really invested. I first encountered Henry James through The Ambassadors, and I started reading that, and then I realized how much I actually really loved it. So I put a pause to The Ambassadors because I felt that The Ambassadors was going to be my peak experience in Henry James, and I wanted to read some of his other works before I got to that. There are some books that I can tell off the bat that they will be my holy grail books, and I will tend to put those down as soon as I recognize that, because I really don't want to ruin my readership, and that has happened to me before. And to read something so great and then to come back to other great books but that aren't that holy grail level, I mean, it puts me in a slump, and this slump lingers a while for me, and it makes me feel like there's nothing else to read in this world, which is untrue, but that is the feeling. So I saved the best for last. Next up, we have Ivanhoe by Sir Walter Scott. And this next one I found online, but it is Marie Antoinette by Stefan Zweig. I have been reading novellas by Stefan Zweig lately, and he is an author of interest. I haven't identified quite yet what it is that compels me to Zweig's works, but I do find it interesting that he writes both fiction and a ton of nonfiction. This is a biography of Marie Antoinette, and he has many, many others. And next up, we have A Fine Balance by Rohinton Mystery. This is one of those books that I have seen catch my eye in many, many corners. And finally, when I saw this at the bookstore, I flipped to a page, and where I landed was on one of my favorite quotes. So that took me off the fence, because I have been on the fence about this book for quite a while, and I snagged it. I was really unsure about this book because I have heard that there are a lot of depressing and disturbing themes, and I definitely have a threshold for how many gut-wrenching and emotional books I can read at a given time. I generally prefer the cerebral, the poetic type works that leave a lot of room for interpretation and for creating new sequences of thought. Works that make me think differently about life and the conditions that we are given to work with in our lives. But I am not one to ignore a serendipitous moment, so when I finally opened this book and I landed on that quote, I was like, okay, it's a done deal. Next up, we have The Making of a Counterculture by Theodore Roszak. Indiana by George Sand. The Decameron by Giovanni Boccaccio. I don't know if I'm saying that right. In the modern English translation. Another Henry James book, The Wings of the Dove. The Golden Treasury of the Best Songs and Lyrical Poems, the complete book, expanded and edited by Oscar Williams. Next up, we have Charles Dickens' Martin Chuzzlewit, and I have never heard of this book by Dickens before, but also I was really drawn to this cover, and I mostly picked it up for the cover. I love Dickens. I have enjoyed everything that I have picked up from him, minus Tale of Two Cities, which I think school had a lot to do with my aversion to it. Next up, we have Carlos Castaneda, A Separate Reality, Further Conversations with Don Juan. Next up, we have Tolkien's translation of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, and I believe the Pearl and Sir Orfeo are other stories in this work as well. I was so excited to find this one because I've also never heard of it, but it is The Eye by Vladimir Nabokov. Next we have Rameau's Nephew and D'Alembert's Dream by Diderot. I am not sure if I'm saying that correctly at all. And lastly, for this part 1 video, we have Balzac's Père Goriot. I am going to get to my writing session in a little bit, and then once I have that done, I will add that clip at the end.
For this session, I wrote 153 words.